You have been sentenced to death is a phrase that currently 2,000, just above 2,000 people in America have heard and continue to await their execution. Um, Today, um, Marcellus Williams was executed via lethal injection. Um, and, he brought up the idea of, the morality of the death penalty. Obviously the Constitution says no cruel and unusual punishments, and many justices of the Supreme Court have interpreted that very differently. For example, Justice Thurgood Marshall was against all and every single death penalty, no matter what the issue was. But officially, the Supreme Court has ruled that the death penalty is um, legal and can be used for the most heinous crimes. But people are fighting back against it. And specifically in the case of Marcellus Williams, um, you know, the victim, the family victim who accused him and prosecuted him for murder, um, they didn't feel that the death penalty was necessary. They didn't support the death penalty. And you saw very quickly a mass rise on social media of people against the death penalty for Marcellus Williams. Yet um, he wanted to stay from the Supreme Court. He couldn't get the writ of certiorari, so today he was killed. And the idea, the eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth sort of ideology is something a lot of Americans agree with. If you kill someone, you should be killed. However, unfortunately, the justice system today can't guarantee that that process is followed very effectively. For instance, since 1976, the likelihood of a black defendant murdering a white victim, the likelihood of receiving the death penalty is far greater than a white defendant and a black victim. So obviously, it's not enough to identify a causal relationship, but there is that correlation. And on top of that, those of people of color, especially black folks, tend to receive the death penalty at a higher rate than white folks. Um, One could argue that this is a systemic, racist thing, and obviously other people could argue different things, but I happen to be leaning towards the side that the justice system definitely does not play fair for every single demographic in this country. On top of that, you have the statistic that, depending on which source you look at, but about 4 to 5% of all people executed by various states have been turned out to be innocent. And that's definitely way too many. In a perfect world, 0 people should be, wrongfully punished. But, at least when you're, thrown in jail or you're fined an exuberant amount or, community service or whatever punishment the judge gives you, those are all reversible in the sense that, you can be compensated, you can be, freed eventually. But, death is not something that is that is something you can get back, certainly not. And I think, the death penalty is one that ultimately comes up to the idea of, where your morals lie. But regardless, like circling back to what I said previously, even though a lot of people can logically, agree with the idea of an eye for an eye or tooth for a tooth, the logistics behind the current method of how we go about applying eye for an eye doesn't work out flawlessly, and I think flawlessly should be the standard. But there are different aspects. Obviously, I don't think there's anybody who thinks that killing Osama bin Laden was the wrong thing to do, especially in America. I mean, the amount of lives he was responsible for taking away. Um, and then you also have situations like the Parkland Stoneman Douglas High School shooting, where the families of the victims preferred that the shooter, was executed because they didn't feel comfortable with his, you know, with the idea that he was still living and breathing. However, we know now that, he was not given the death penalty because I believe he was too young or something along those lines. But regardless, I think the death penalty is one that um, really makes me scratch my head because it's ultimately a test on how tough one is, when in reality it should be taken from a more pragmatic approach. I'm curious as to what you guys think, how you think maybe we could fix it. If that fix is getting rid of the death penalty altogether, I would like to know. Um, you know, Funny enough, my professor told me that the state of Washington actually hanged a man as his sentence of death not too long ago, which is, I think, maybe 14, 15 years ago, which is kind of crazy. A lot of companies that provide lethal injection are taking away and removing their products from being sold. So lots of talks of the firing squad and other means of execution are coming back in. I don't know if the founding fathers or the framers of the Constitution necessarily thought that those forms of execution are unjustified. I do believe, however, if they did think the death penalty together was unjustified, they would have put it in the Constitution. But that's just my opinion. Yeah, it's a very, very interesting topic, to say the least. With that said, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoy your day, and I'll see you tomorrow.